our police officers are our friends. But just a little point, I don't see how you're fixing that when your police officer can still spray you in the face with some pepper spray. They can still tase you, and when you create this special task force that has specific weapons that is utilized and mobilized specifically to act in a violent way. What do we call this, Mr. Speaker? We call it a SWAT team. What do they look like, Mr. Speaker? They have masks on their face. You don't get to see their eyes. They use bulletproof armor, and they use machine guns. This is the type of mobilized violent task force that you're going to be authorizing in any type of scenario. So what happens in the government world when a police officer sees one of the bad guys with a gun? Not only do they not have the ability to stop that situation from escalating at that moment, they call in the SWAT team and they end the situation. It is there, it's final, and that means that person is dead because the SWAT team doesn't discriminate. They have weapons that don't discriminate. We want to stop this on our side of the house. Secondly, this idea of a police state. Just a little bit of logic for the government team. If your police officers don't have guns, you need to increase the efficacy of the security that you provide. What does that mean? That means you have to have a whole lot more police officers, Mr. Speaker. What does that mean? That means there's a police officer on every single corner. That means there are SWAT team mobilization stations on every single street because you need the ability for a rapid response. We believe that that's much more like a police state than what we have in the status quo. No, thank you. So 2 points of positive matter before I tell you exactly why we won the debate today. Number one, what is specifically the role of a police officer? And number two, what does we mean by non-lethal weapons? And then Brian is going to tell you about a higher degree of sensitivity for police officers and how that exists in the status quo. So the role of a police officer, Mr. Speaker, is twofold. They have an investigative role and they have a role to provide for short-term security. The investigative portion of this is clearly not what we're speaking about. So we're talking about detectives, we're talking about any person that can aid in the prosecution of defenders. They need to have the ability to acquire specific information. But on that second aspect, police officers also have the obligation and the duty to provide for enforcement if they see what is called something that is violative of the exigent circumstances doctrine, Mr. Speaker. If they hear someone screaming out of a house, stop, stop, he has a gun, what does the police officer have the right and the duty to do? Break into that house and protect that person from being raped, from being murdered. They talked about some random mishap that might happen when a police officer accidentally shoots someone, but they didn't talk to you about any one of the thousands of numbers of cases where police officers have adequately provided for the lives of our citizens when they stop people from killing one another, okay? So when you look at the status quo in the United States of America today, guns are very easily accessible. Knives are very easily accessible. When lethal weapons are for sale every single day, and when there are bad people out there that want to rape, that want to murder, that want to kill, and they have access to these lethal weapons, our police officers have to have the ability to adequately combat these forces and protect our citizens. You take this away from them. But secondly, and I'll take you in just a moment, you provide for greater escalation because you have one of two scenarios occurring, Mr. Speaker. Either the police officer breaks into that house, and because the person that's trying to rape someone or trying to murder someone has a gun, and they do not, they get shot. So now you have two deaths, Mr. Speaker, the death of a police officer and the death of an innocent civilian. Or you call it a SWAT team. The SWAT team breaks down the house, kills the person without any type of investigation, and that removes any alternative for any type of stopping the scenario without violence. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We agree that when he said that the police are there to defend, all the weapons that he's listed, pepper spray, riot shields, whatever, are all defensive. He has to tell us how a gun is defensive. We think they are strictly offensive and they're never on the defense. They are not necessary.
Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker, because what a gun provides is the visage that a police officer can actually stop the assailant, can actually stop the murderer, Mr. Speaker. So when a police officer breaks into the house and they have a gun, what do they have the ability to do? They have the ability to say, stop, stop. They have to say stop first. You shoot the leg first, Mr. Speaker. You do not shoot the kill. Absolutely not. This is the second idea about non-lethal weapons. All right? So a couple of points about this. If police officers have their weapons taken away, what does this lead them to do? They have a greater propensity to use their non-lethal weapons because they are afraid, because there is this disparity of power, because the people that they are trying to fight, the people that they are trying to stop, have the ability to kill them, Mr. Speaker. So what does this mean? This means that the second a police officer fears for his or her life, they will flood the pepper spray, they will start tasing people left and right. It will absolutely hamstring the ability of the police officer to investigate any type of scenario. But when you look at the training of the police officer, there's a reason, Mr. Speaker, there's a clip on that gun holster. There's a reason they're training to say stop, freeze, Mr. Speaker, put your hands up before they remove that clip. That clip, Mr. Speaker, is a physical representation of the hesitation that we train our police officers to employ when they use lethal force. That is why it is a crime, Mr. Speaker. It is a crime for a police officer to leave his gun unclipped when they are not authorized or willing to use that deadly force. So when you take that weapon away from the police officer, you take away that hesitation, and you necessarily mean that they are more willing to use any type of force that they see fit to protect themselves. So because these guns provide the safety shield for our citizens when the bad guys have these guns as well, because these guns allow our police officers to stop murders, to stop rapes, and to stop the criminals in their tracks in the short term, and because these guns allow for the adequate protection of the people that are trying to protect us, Mr. Speaker, and because if you take away these guns, they will resort to the tools that they are more readily able to use because they're not lethal. I don't think it's okay, Mr. Speaker, for a police officer to have the ability that is unchecked and unmitigated to pepper spray anyone, to tase anyone just because they are afraid. This is absolutely what's going to happen on their side of the house. This is what you see when you have a greater police state. More police officers using non-lethal weapons more rapidly, SWAT teams that don't discriminate, that kill on sight because the police officers are afraid. This is what we want to prevent on the side of the house. And because we believe in rapid escalation underneath the government's plan, we are very proud to defend the status quo.